If, as I was when I found out, you were knocked on the floor by the startling truth in the 3 pictures of my previous episode, you will be aware that the mental images you previously had of what made and what makes and what will make the world go around were all wrong, because you have been and are being and will be lied to by doublethink propaganda. Oh, who cares? Enough of things that matter. Let's talk about nicer things that don't matter. Let's talk about Go. When G saw this position, his first thought was what he called the black shape. Shape is a word that means to you what it means to you, but that's not necessarily what it means to everyone else. In my own case, I think of shape as being the form of the surface surrounding a 3-dimensional object, or that of the lines surrounding a 2-dimensional one. But when, just this morning, I watched for the first time the first episode of Hikaru no Go, I discovered that the Japanese word that the anime translator translated into the English word shape doesn't mean what the word shape means to me.
今のが主張って言って、いくら逃げても逃げられない形なんだ。対局中はよく出てくる形だから、それを気にしながら今日のところは見学しててくれるかな。
Because in Go, once you graduate to 29Q, you never see a real ladder on the board, only imaginary ones that no one with half a brain, not even the dumbest computer, would allow themselves to be caught in. No one, that is, except me, who often also fails to see Atari until after the event. I suppose I might concentrate better if I didn't watch TV whilst playing Go. But I've never been any good at doing only one thing at a time, and like all monkeys, I'm easily bored by just about anything. Anything except cleavage, that is. Ladders are like witches and gods. They don't exist in the real world, but you can imagine them. So a shape is not something that is real, it's something you imagine. Something you imagine that could happen, just as H.G. Wells imagined the shape of things that he hoped would come, and that Ray Bradbury hoped would not come. And so on and so on. When G says the word shape, I think he means the same as I think it means. But we must not forget the wise words of Humpty Dumpty, and be constantly aware that what you think somebody else means by what they say isn't necessarily what they mean, and indeed it can be the exact opposite when you get the wrong end of the stick. So let's just take it at face value and infer that he means the string of black stones in the corner. I call it a string because that's what Walter Reitman and Bruce Wilcox called such things, but New Go calls them worms, and God only knows what Many Faces calls them these days.
The shape in the corner and white's one space jump shape inside black's eye space are the focal points.
G also calls a jump a shape, which Walter calls a group, and Nu calls a dragon. Well, it's just a name. More important is what it means, so we can tell Hallie what to look for. I chose this situation as a starting point because it's just one string of black stones. But the shape they make is not a string, it's a 2-dimensional geometric area, an area bounded by strings which together make a shape, in this case just one string, and the edges of the board. I'm trying to think of an algorithm that could trace out the boundary of a shape. It looks easy to come up with one for situations like this. But how about situations like this? Ideally, I'd like Hallie to be able to see what Haley sees, but I don't think she would agree to having her head cut open so we can look inside. I will share with you later on what she said about this position, but for the moment, let's try and teach Hallie to see like G. Or rather, since we can't cut his head open either, the best we can do is tell Hallie how to see in the way that we think G sees, based solely on what he says. However, even though G said a lot about this position, like any of us, he cannot say everything that is in his head, because he doesn't know himself. Most of his knowledge is subconscious. Just as neuroscientist Christoph Koch doesn't know what's in his own head either.
The thing is, we don't know the minimal size of a brain necessary to be conscious. We really have no idea. So if you look at, for example, if you look at insects, most people instinctively say, well, that's a bug, and bugs are unconscious. I can just squish bugs. But if you look at the complex adaptive behavior of a bee, and if you look at what a bee is capable of in terms of single trial learning, very adaptive behavior when it flies through mazes to find sugar, what the feats of sort of code intelligence it can do is quite prodigious. So it's really, we really don't know whether it doesn't feel like something to be a bee. So I think right now it shows up the problem that we don't have a Turing test. We don't have a clear test that tells us whether a creature is conscious. We think it's conscious if it talks. That's been sort of the conventional criterion. Of course, many philosophers believe, or many linguists believe, that's the definition of consciousness. But that's of course putting the horse before the cart. Just because we talk and we are conscious doesn't mean that consciousness is tied up with or depends on language. So in fact, when you give a talk like this, or when you just have a normal conversations and you try to think about having the conversation while you're actually having it, you realize that it's not conscious. I mean, it's not there isn't a little Christoph inside my head who says, okay, this is what I want to say. This is the verb, this is the noun, this is in German, now translate it, and then I send it off to my speech apparatus. It doesn't happen like that. I have a vague idea what I want to say next, and then the next thing I hear these words come pouring out of my mouth. And it's a very sophisticated thing, or reasonable sophisticated thing. And so this all happens without consciousness.
To teach Halley how to see like G, we have to carefully study what he says when he looked at the position for only 2 seconds. This is what he saw with a quick glance, without time to read out any continuations. G noticed that black can't escape into the center. He said black is worried about a capturing race and a flower 5 or rabbity 6 shape. What did G spot to make him think black is worried? After all, there are 6 black stones and only 2 white ones, and black has 7 liberties, 3 more than the 4 that many faces of Go thinks is enough for a string to be temporarily safe. So why should G worry for black? Why does he think it could be a co? What do you think? Do you think it could become a co? You already know from episode 11 what B says about it. But how about you? What do you think? B and G only looked at it for 2 seconds, but you can take as long as you like. Please share your thoughts by writing a comment. Don't worry about making a mistake. This is not a test. I will moderate comments, and if anyone says anything nasty or bullying about your comment, I will delete it and block them. My own first thoughts on G's first thoughts, based on what he says about them, are that he saw several things all at once. Black can't escape to the center, so he has to make 2 eyes on the side. There's enough room inside for black to make 2 eyes, but white has 2 stones in the way, so black has to kill white to live. The 2 white stones have a cutting point. It's usually a good idea to cut groups in order to kill one or other of them, so black should cut white. The cutting stone would be in Damazumari, so it probably would itself be captured. So black has to try and turn white's capture of black's cutting stone into a ko. If white wins that ko, he can fill the ko, building a killing shape such as a flowery 5 or a rabbity 6. There's enough room inside black for white to do so, but not so much that black could make a second eye elsewhere. So G decides he needs to read it out.